Things that happen, if y'all remember, about the term "give me liberty" or "give me death." That situation happened in Virginia. There was a guy that was being beat, and it just so happened one of the guys drove up in his horse and saw this happening. You might remember his name. I believe it was Patrick Henry. And so he started seeing this guy getting beat and really bad. And so they asked him, what did he do? He wouldn't take a license. And so that's when he decided to go to the legislature, and that's where we got this "give me liberty" or "give me death," because that individual, him and 12 other pastors, were being forced to a license that they didn't want. Okay, so that's part of our history. A lot of people don't know that, and that's the reason why I bring it up, because history is very important to us. If we forget the past, then we lose the compass to the future. Okay. And so this is important that we remember these things. So when I bring these things up is because I need to share what's happened, because if you go back to the very first convention, it was Madison, and I believe it was Madison. I may have to go back and look because it's been a while. He's the one that said we no longer want corporations representing the people. Why? Because what they did was that they subject the people to corporations under the crown. That's what happened. Okay? And so they don't want that no more. So we didn't have that for a long period of time. And we were very successful. And then we started getting this corporation called the United States in 1871. It only really started seeing some little headway in the federal government and not in the states yet, okay? Because all that was really for, and if you really look, we only had 7 departments under the Constitution. We didn't have what we call now the alphabet, okay? So what I'm saying here is we need to be aware of what happened, so we can see how we can do to correct it. Because we can't fix something if we don't know what it is. My people perish for lack of knowledge, Hosea 4:6. So what I'm saying here, we need to have some knowledge so we can know where to go. Faith without works is dead, so we've got to do some work, okay? So then this process, after these corporations started happening, they started now to infringe in some of our departments, and they started to create corporations, entities underneath the United States Corporation. And so now we have a whole bunch of alphabets, and they all have their own. If you're familiar with EN numbers, are you familiar with Dun and Bradstreet? Dun and Bradstreet is like the credit for businesses, okay? And therefore profit corporations. I'm going to pull you out a clip right now. I'm going to show you a lot of corporations, and you might be familiar with them. So if you will pull, I believe it is, I'm used to doing this. So let's just go right to, maybe I didn't put it. That's not going to be there. Okay, that's not going to be there either. Okay, it's not, those are the little clips. So we need to go off, and we need to go back to Studio E, the Studio Win.
Okay. Here?
Yeah, click on that. Mm-hmm. Okay, we are. Okay, there we go. Now let's go to events. I think that's where we need to go. And we need to go to Dun and Bradstreet, Dun's numbers.
That's a PDF.
Yes, that's fine. Can you open it up? Now, if you can just open this up a little bit, okay? Now, everybody knows if you have an EN number, you have a business, this is for a profit corporation, correct? So let's look at some of these profit for corporation companies existing today. You already see the United States. That's his Dun and Bradstreet number. So let's scan some of these. Department of Defense, Department of Treasury, Department of Justice, they're incorporated, okay? These are its numbers. If you keep on going, we're gonna see some more, okay? These are all corporations. They all have their EN number. And see, this is the problem why when they make rules and you gotta follow them, is because they're making the rules and they're violating our Constitution because they were not approved for it. Okay, so we got to understand this, okay? So we keep going, and then looky here. Now we go to the states. Guess what? The states incorporated. So let's look at New Mexico. New Mexico, if you go up, guess what? It incorporated too. Keep going up. Okay, so there it is. That's New Mexico, and even City of Albuquerque, and some of the other cities that have come online, okay? So now we're seeing here now, does anybody have the Constitution of the state of New Mexico with them? Okay? That's fine. We got one here. Okay? I want to show you something on it. If you go to Article 1, which is boundaries and names of the state of New Mexico, would you read it for me, please?
The name of this state is New Mexico, and its boundaries are as follows. You want me to continue?
Good. So you just heard the name of this state is New Mexico. Now, for some of us that have been around a while, you might remember the acronym N period, MEX period. Okay? Some of you might remember CALIF period. Some of you might remember TEX period. These are the republic states. These are the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Okay? These are not. These are corporations. These will subject you. Okay? There's a difference. So, what we're saying here, we're starting to learn, because I was talking about governments, and these are what we call corporate governments. Okay? We're talking about getting back to the Constitution and going back to the government of the people, by the people, for the people. That's what was established. So that's the reason why I teach this, because, you know, even one of my kids, when they were in high school, and this is quite some years back, by the way, I asked him, I says, are they teaching this stuff? He says, what are you talking about, Dad? And I gave him a little bit of this information. No, Dad. I says, I went to the high school, went to the principal, and I says, are you teaching this? And he says, no, we're not. And I says, I will be glad to come in and do it for free. Guess the response I got? No. I can't do it. Okay? So this gives you an idea of what has happened and where we're going. And so now that we have this information, and by the way, I want you to roll this a little bit more, because you're not going to be surprised with what you see here. Okay? Keep going. Guess who else? Guess who else? Okay? Guess who else? This is another biggie right here. The New World Order, the WHO. Excuse me, I said the New World Order. Excuse me, I didn't mean it that way.
That's what I'm
Anyways, now you have an idea of what I'm teaching and what I'm bringing in, because there's a reason for this, okay? Because we're going to move on next to another clip, and this clip is going to give us an idea how we can get back, because even in what has actually happened, folks, when you go back to the New Deal, some of you guys remember the New Deal of Roosevelt? Okay? Well, see, we know we have three branches of government. We all know them. Okay? The legislative, okay? The executive, and the judiciary, correct? Okay? Well, what happened in 1933, roughly, the New Deal, they decided to create what is known as the administrative court under the executive branch. Okay? So now you know where the courts are today. They're courts of commerce. They're not common law courts. If you're familiar with our Declaration, if you're familiar with the Bill of Rights, and you read the Bill of Rights, it talks about common law, okay? Now the history about common law is this. Jefferson made it very clear. Jefferson, common law is based on the ancient principles, and the ancient principles, folks, is the Ten Commandments. If you were like me as a little kid, you saw the Ten Commandments all over the place as a kid and in the courts and everywhere else. Right around the 1960s, after they started taking prayer out, guess what? They started taking out of the courts, okay? So we were no longer operating in common law. Now, in the state of New Mexico, that happened in 1986. If you look at our Constitution, they amended Article 3, okay? Article 3 was the original three branches. They amended it in 1986, and now it's called the Workmen's Compensation Act. So it put all of you as employees under a state statute jurisdiction. So you have now statute that you have to answer to, because you never had them before, prior to that, okay? What's interesting is they followed the New Mexico Traffic and Criminal Law Manual, okay? Well, if you read it, you have the Constitution of the state of New Mexico in it. So why are they doing this? There's an option to get out of it. There is, in Article 3, Section 38, 4, it talks about common law, folks. Okay? So now we can come back and start bringing common law back into the judicial system, back into what's happened for us. Okay? So now I want to go a little bit further, and we're going to look at this particular item, which is USC 42, that's Title 42, United States Code. It's going to be Section 1983, And this is deprivation of rights under color of law. Okay? What I just stated with you is color of law. That's statutes, ordinance, regulations. These are all fiction. Okay? It's called presumption of law. If we presume and you want to follow it, then you follow it, and once you contract, you're bound, right? But if you don't have to. Okay? But we got into the place now in our society to where even if you know this, they're going to impose it on you anyway. It's called duress. Okay? So we got to educate ourselves, because here's why we share about people. The responsibility doesn't really rely on our servants, because it is the government of the people, for the people. Whose responsibility do you think it is? It's our responsibility. We need to stand up. Okay? We need to unite. You might have heard that united we stand, divided we fall. You might have heard that somewhere. Okay? So I bring this up because this is the avenue we have. And so we're going to run another little clip, and then we're going to talk about this and open it up. So if we go back now to our clips, and let's see, that would be right there again. And then go back to common sense and go to events. And then it's going to be one more click right there. And let's go to, let's see where it's at. It's here somewhere. There you go. We're going to run this little clip, folks, and then we'll talk about this.
The topic that I'm going to begin with is the topic of sovereign immunity. So return with me to Europe back in the good old days of totalitarian monarchies. Justice emanates from the crown, and you can't sue the king. That would be nonsensical, justice emanating from the king. The king being the fountain of justice can't be susceptible to his own adverse decisions. This doctrine, which developed over centuries in Europe, is called sovereign immunity. The sovereign is immune from judicial process, from judicial liability. It's a doctrine that one would think would have been offensive to the founders of the Republic, and I'm sure it was to many of them, yet it's a doctrine that, on forming a new country here, they chose to adopt. So sovereign immunity crosses the Atlantic. Sovereignty is vested in a different authority in the United States. It's the people who are sovereign, but the people can't be sued. The United States is immune from suit, and that's just how it is, unless it is willing to waive its immunity and allow itself to be sued. Now that's the federal sovereign immunity rule. It's not in the Constitution. It's arguably grounded in the structure of the Constitution, but maybe it's more properly located in federal common law. Well, there are three ways. There are three things that can happen that get us around this expanded 11th Amendment problem. The first is that the United States can sue. 11th Amendment doesn't bar suits by the United States against states if they've violated constitutional requirements. The second is that states can waive their immunity. And that actually happens more than you might think. The federal government does too. There are two big statutes at the federal level, and they're state mirrors. One's the Tucker Act, which is a statute that waives federal sovereign immunity for government contract lawsuits. So you contract to sell pencils to the federal government, they don't pay you, you can sue them, right, under the Tucker Act. And then the Federal Tort Claims Act, that's if you get run over by a mail carrier, you can sue. There's a tort that's been committed. And most of the states, probably all states, have things like that. But that doesn't necessarily help you on constitutional claims. So the last answer, and this is probably the most important, certainly for constitutional law purposes, is a 1908 Supreme Court decision created exception called Ex parte Young. Edward Young was the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, charged with enforcing allegedly unconstitutional state railroad regulations. And the railroads couldn't sue the state because of the 11th Amendment, but they thought, maybe we can sue Young, and so they did. So they filed suit against Young, seeking an injunction, a court order, a federal court order to him to stop enforcing these unconstitutional state laws. And the Supreme Court took that and thought, we really haven't left folks many ways of challenging unconstitutional action by states. So let's go with this. And the Ex parte Young rule, since 1908, has been the principal mechanism for filing constitutional claims against state governments that you believe have violated your constitutional rights. You can't sue the state, you can't sue for money, but you can sue a state official for an injunction to get him or her to stop enforcing what you believe to be an unconstitutional state act. Thank you.
Okay,
So that gives you an idea that we do have an avenue, okay? There is a possibility to do this. So this is what I'm getting at. We've all tried, and I know a lot of folks in the state of New Mexico that put a lot of lawsuits in the state, and some of them look like they're going to be very successful, and at the very end, it doesn't happen, okay? We're familiar with this, okay? So my proposal to you all folks is to consider the idea, and I'm one for prayer. I love intercession prayer because I see things move when I see prayer. So I'm asking that you pray about this. I'm asking that you consider this possibility about if you really want to do something about changing a bill or changing a regulation or a statute, something you think that is unconstitutional and you think you want it to stop, then we might want to discuss this idea how to address it in the federal court so that we can get an injunction to stop it. Might be the governor, it might be the state secretary, then again, who knows, it might be legislatures that pass something that you don't like. This is just food for thought, okay? I'm also talking to other groups, so let you know that you're not alone. What's happening is I'm getting a basis of people that really are interested. And if you really are interested, then we can move forward, because some of you are probably already aware of some of these bills like SB 3, what's that? I don't have my glasses.
Vanity.
Hello,
Hello, vanity.
Hello.
Let's see, there's SB 397. The school-based health centers become primary health care for students and provide direct access to abortion procedures, transgender, and other life-changing interventions without parental notification. HB 7, reproductive and gender-affirming health care, makes it illegal for school or healthcare personnel to notify a parent if their child is having an abortion, going through a gender transition, contemplating suicide, or has other significant life issues. SB 13 is reproductive health provider protections. It works with HB 7 to further erode parental rights. It protects predatory practices against our children by providing immunity to anyone helping them make life-altering decisions without their parents' involvement. HB 207, Expand Human Rights Act scope. It creates difficulties for churches and others by limiting their rights to manage their organization according to that organization's beliefs. HB 4 is voting rights protections. It expands voting rights to felons and anyone using a state agency who is not currently registered to vote. They will be automatically registered to vote without their knowledge of consent. SB 180, election changes. It prevents the public from reviewing and overseeing election data, plus other extensive election law changes that erode confidence in our elections. And if I could just add for this one about the school-based health centers, that they can help children without the parents' notification, without the parents' involvement. So let's just say a child gets pregnant and wants an abortion, mom and dad don't have to know about it. Now, let's just say, heaven forbid, something happens and that child, so the abortion is botched. Guess who gets to pay for that? Mom and dad. Because they are on mom and dad's insurance. So these are the things that other groups that Cipriano and I talked to, that these are the things that they are considering Title 42 against the one in the outhouse up there in Santa Fe.
Oh, you mean the outhouse?
Did I say the outhouse? I think I meant the outhouse. But these are some of the things that they want to invoke Title 42 to a federal court against the state.
No, not the state, the individual.
The individual doing business as
Yes.
the person in the state.
So this gives you an idea of what we're doing and why we're doing this. But I also want to have you bear in mind that there is a process to do this under 42, and there are some constitutional jurisdictions and rules we need to follow by. And so once we follow those rules, we can get in there and we can do some stopping. This I'm seeing in a couple of processes already, and I'm seeing some state individuals being stopped with their actions as we speak. They cannot continue moving forward doing what they're doing until the federal court decides what they're going to do with those cases. One of them's been going for almost a year now. The other one is going roughly on 4 or 5 months. And so the state agencies are really scrambling the individuals, because we're seeing some DAs they're stopped. They cannot do nothing until the federal court says you can do something. Okay? So this is happening. And so, excuse me?
You can go after Maggie.
You, of course, you can go whoever you want. Okay? So these are the things I wanted to bring up. One of the things I also like for you to consider, you got a question or comment over there?
But like you mentioned on Saturday, it's not one person, you need a group.
Yes. Yes. And this is how this actually works. So I want to clarify this. The state constitution structure does not seem to have a avenue in doing what I'm going to talk about, but the federal government does. Okay? So if someone decides to come in as a plaintiff and bring in a representative or a state secretary or a governor or whoever it may be as a defendant, then we have individuals that can come in and intervene in that case and have equal standing as the plaintiff and the defendant. So then you can now start filing and asking questions. You can file motions, you can file pleadings, you can file affidavits, you can file these things, and the court has to answer it, okay? They cannot ignore you. So my idea behind all this, if you have one person that starts, what happens if you have thousands of people intervening in a case? And I'll tell you why this is important. Because right around 2014, 2016, in that area, there was an individual that came to me and said, I want to do something about the CASA. I don't know, you may be familiar with the CASA agreement, the Department of Justice against the City of Albuquerque for constitutional violations. I don't know if you know that. Okay, it was been ongoing, and they had meetings around the city. It's been about almost 10 years now. He wanted to interfere in that case. He wanted to get in there. So I said, okay. Check to see what it would take, look at the rules, and said, yeah, you can do this under this rule. So he went in. What happened is once he intervened, there was 5 or 6 other organizations and individuals that intervened. So then that means the judge, Black at that time was his name, had to open up the court to accommodate for the interveners as parties in that case. That's the reason why I went on for a lot longer, because otherwise it wouldn't have gone that far. But that means now the court has to entertain on answering and allowing all parties, interveners included, to have a say-so. Okay? So this is an idea and a thought of why we're bringing this up. Because when we did this, it was just him, okay? And we went in that hearing, the judge was very clear, and I was in that court. This is firsthand knowledge. The judge said, "Are you the only one that's coming in this intervention and you're trying to represent the people?" And he said, "Yes." He says, "We need the people here. You're just one person. So I'm not going to allow it. I'm going to dismiss this." And then here comes the marshals and say, "Get out of the court." So they chased us right out of the court. So that's the reason why when I started looking at this process and what happened, they will not look at us as an individual, but what happens if the people start waking up? What happens if the people start saying, "We need to do this"? Could you imagine 2,000, 3,000 people or more intervene in a case? Food for thought. At this point, any questions? Any comments? Any thoughts? Yes?
How in the world did we fall asleep on the wheel?
Well, it's real simple. If you were like me, I says, "You guys take care of it. I'm busy having life," and it's been pretty good. And then all of a sudden people like me start recognizing, wait a minute, my rights are being violated. I need to go see what's going on, okay? So that's what caught my curiosity, because guys, I came around the time where I had an uncle, a relative who decided to be a sheriff in Santa Fe County, and I was a young kid and I decided to hang around and see what was going on, and they were practicing common law back then, and I knew what it meant. It was not surprising that the people were wise when the license came around and it's commercial and people are getting pulled over and they said, "No, wait a minute, you gotta get the sheriff." So a deputy would come over and say, "Hey, he doesn't want to contract you, you gotta leave him alone, he's got rights." And the city police had to leave because they were law enforcement officers and we were calling for peace officers. That's the sheriff, okay? So it worked back then, okay? And so I decided to leave to the military in '73, and when I came back, I went to Los Alamos and got a federal badge, and people are telling me what was going on about their rights being violated, and I started looking to see what was going on, and I was stunned to see our constitutional change in Article 3. Started seeing what was going on with this new so-called statute, statewide jurisdiction, and I started seeing something that was really wrong for me. Because I grew up knowing. I knew that there was the people's government at the county courthouse in its seal, and I knew there was another court, a district court for the servants. At one time our servants used to police our servants. Really happened at one time. Happened for a long time, and then something happened. We're going to leave it as that. You had a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Have you given your presentation to Carlos Suntag and Better Together in New Mexico?
No, I have not.
So the reason I'm saying this is you're saying you're going to need a lot of people behind you to start the litigation type of process. So what she has done is she has put together statewide a number of organizations across the state who actually, when she calls upon them, will send a bunch of letters and things back to the legislature before a bill gets passed, supposedly to put a lot of pressure on the legislatures to back off. But so she has a network, and she's been developing that over the last 2 years or so. She's continuing to grow it, and it's actually working in our favor to sort of put a stop on the agenda that MLG has had. But she wants to make it much more. It's kind of like what the Democrats do when they're when they have a bill they want, they'll bring in all the various groups to come in, and so we're doing the same thing now. And so it seems to me that you should try to talk to Carla and Suntag, give her your presentation, and it seems to me a very, very good match between the two of you, because when the time comes for that litigation, she could bring in the right folks to go before the judge.
What was the name?
Better Together in New Mexico.
Better Together New Mexico. Now, okay, the only one that I know of, and some of you might know, Annette and Larry Marker. I'm familiar with that group, and I think those are the ones that were petitioning through the counties. Okay? So I'm actually working with getting in contact with them, and I'm hoping that all ties in together. Yeah, I know that. I'm aware. Let's see if we can change it. Question?
It's not a question, but to add on to that, what Carlos Sontag's doing is, so they ended up having because they all had to give up on what was going on with the referendum. They weren't going to get the signatures. So she backed out of it a little bit earlier
but they're still doing it as a petition.
Yeah.
So she's got that.